The rain hadn't stopped all evening. Outside the airport windows, streaks of water blurred the runway lights into ribbons of gold and blue. Ethan Moore stood by the crew counter, jacket folded over one arm, waiting for the announcement that would finally let him go home. The last flight out of the city had been canceled because of weather. Most of the crew had already scattered to nearby hotels, but one name still lingered on the roster: Captain Lucas Grant. He'd missed his connecting flight and needed a place to stay. With all hotels booked, the airline arranged something unusual: a shared apartment with another crew member. That crew member was Ethan. When Ethan opened his apartment door an hour later, Lucas stood there, still half in uniform, tie loosened, suitcase handle in hand. "Guess I'm grounded for the night," he said with a small smile. His voice carried that confident warmth pilots always seem to have: steady, calm, a little teasing. Ethan stepped aside to let him in, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the scattered travel magazines on his coffee table. "Hope you don't mind the company," Lucas added. Setting down his bag, "Not at all," Ethan said, trying to sound relaxed. "Coffee? Only if you're having one." They sat across from each other in the small living room. The rain drummed on the windows. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's television hummed. Ethan asked about the canceled flight, and Lucas shrugged. "Happens more often than people think. Weather, timing, 100 little things. You learn to let go of control." He took a sip of coffee and glanced around the apartment. "You live close to the airport?" "Too close," Ethan said with a laugh. "The sound of engines is basically my alarm clock." Lucas smiled. Then we're both addicted to the sky. They traded stories: delayed departures, strange passengers, nights spent chasing sleep in hotel rooms that all smelled the same. Lucas had been flying for 11 years. He'd seen sunrise over the Pacific, lightning over the Andes. Yet when he spoke about it, there was a kind of quiet weariness behind the pride. "You'd think all that travel would make you feel free," he said. "Sometimes it just makes you realize how far away you are from everything." Ethan understood. He told Lucas about his boyfriend, Daniel, who worked abroad. "Different time zones. We talk, but mostly about schedules and bills. It's like maintenance mode," Lucas nodded slowly. "Presence," he murmured. "That's what keeps love alive. Being there. We forget that sometimes." The lights flickered as thunder rolled across the city. Ethan found a candle in the drawer and struck a match. The small flame painted the room in gold and shadow. Lucas watched it for a moment, then leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "There's something peaceful about storms," he said. "They force you to stop moving." Ethan laughed quietly. "We could use that sometimes." "Maybe that's why I missed my flight," Lucas replied, smiling. "Maybe the universe decided I needed to sit still." The words hung there. The clock ticked softly. Outside, rainwater raced down the glass like silver threads. Ethan felt a calm he hadn't known in weeks, an ease born not from attraction, but from the simple act of being seen. Lucas didn't fill the silence. He respected it. That made Ethan trust him instantly. When the candle guttered low, Lucas stood and stretched. "You should get some rest," he said gently. "Big day tomorrow." Ethan nodded, but he didn't move. "You can take the bedroom," he offered. "I'll use the couch." "Not a chance," Lucas said. "You've already saved my night." He unrolled a spare blanket and lay down on the couch. Ethan turned off the last lamp. The room fell into soft darkness, broken only by the rhythm of the rain. As he walked to his room, Lucas's voice drifted across the quiet. "Thanks, Ethan, for the coffee." "And the company," Ethan smiled to himself. "Good night, Captain." He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the candle's faint scent of wax still in the air. He thought about Daniel, about how distant their voices had sounded on the phone the night before. Then he thought about Lucas's words. Presence keeps love alive. He wasn't sure what that meant for him, but it echoed inside his chest, steady as the rain outside. Somewhere in the living room, the pilot shifted in his sleep, the couch creaking softly. Ethan turned toward the window, watching lightning flash behind the clouds. The storm made everything feel suspended in time, every thought, every heartbeat, every breath. And as the night stretched on, one quiet realization followed him into sleep. If Lucas hadn't missed his flight, Ethan might never have noticed how lonely he truly was. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the city washed clean and quiet. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen counter, where Lucas stood making breakfast. He'd found eggs, bread, and instant coffee, turning Ethan's usually empty fridge into something warm and alive. "You run a decent bed and breakfast," he joked as Ethan walked in, hair still damp from the shower. Ethan laughed softly. "Only when pilots miss their flights." Lucas smiled, flipping a slice of bread in the pan. "Then I'll have to miss more often." His voice carried that teasing calm again, but there was something different now, softer, more personal. Ethan sat at the table, watching the morning light catch the edges of Lucas's hair. He wasn't used to quiet mornings like this. Usually it was rushing, packing, heading to the airport. But this morning felt still, and it scared him a little. Over breakfast, they talked about travel again, about favorite routes, dream destinations, places that still felt like home. "For me," Lucas said, "it's not a city. It's the feeling of landing and knowing someone's waiting for you." He looked up at Ethan when he said it, and something unspoken passed between them. Ethan broke the gaze, focusing on his coffee. "Daniel used to wait for me," he said quietly. "We'd text all the time. Lately it's more like quick check-ins. He's busy, I'm busy. We just keep telling ourselves it's temporary." Lucas nodded. "Distance doesn't kill love," he said softly. "Silence does." Ethan let the words settle. He didn't know whether Lucas meant to sound so sincere, but it hit harder than he expected. After they finished eating, Lucas offered to help clean up. They worked in easy silence, hands brushing occasionally as they passed dishes. Each accidental touch carried a flicker of awareness neither could explain. When Lucas's next flight got delayed again, they decided to spend the day outside. The city was bright after the rain, everything shining as if freshly painted. They walked without any real destination. Through a park, past a street musician playing guitar, down to a small cafe tucked between bookstores. It was the kind of day that unfolded naturally, without plans or expectations. "Do you ever wonder," Ethan asked as they walked, "if we meet certain people at the wrong time?" Lucas smiled faintly. "All the time. But maybe it's not the wrong time. Maybe it's just the time we need them most." They talked about everything. Childhood dreams, missed chances, the strange loneliness that came with constant travel. Lucas admitted that being a pilot often felt like living in motion, but never really arriving anywhere. "I meet people, I say goodbye. Over and over. It gets easy to forget what it's like to stay." Ethan listened quietly. The honesty in Lucas's voice wasn't dramatic. It was gentle and real. He realized he hadn't had a conversation like this with Daniel in months. With Lucas, it felt effortless, natural. By evening, the sky turned silver again, clouds gathering for another light rain. They returned to the apartment, both a little quieter now. Ethan lit the same candle from the night before. Its flame flickered like memory. They sat on the couch, the sound of rain returning softly against the windows. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know," he said, "yesterday I told myself I'd just get through the night and go. But I didn't expect to feel like this," Ethan swallowed. "Like what?" Lucas hesitated. "Like I've known you longer than a day." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that holds everything words can't say. Ethan's heart thudded, steady but heavy. He wasn't sure if it was wrong to feel close to someone else, someone who wasn't Daniel. But the feeling didn't ask for permission. "It was just there." "I shouldn't," Ethan whispered. "I have someone," Lucas nodded. "I know." His voice was calm, steady, respectful. "And I'm not asking for anything. I just didn't want the moment to pass without saying it mattered." Ethan's chest tightened. He looked at Lucas, at the quiet sincerity in his face, and for a heartbeat, everything felt suspended again. The air, the rain, the world. He wanted to say thank you or sorry or something to break the weight between them, but nothing came. Lucas gave a small smile, one that didn't reach his eyes, and leaned back on the couch. The candlelight danced across both their faces. Ethan realized he was memorizing the moment, knowing it would end soon. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The closeness was already there, in the way they looked at each other, in the soft ache of knowing what couldn't be. Later that night, Ethan stood in the hallway, watching Lucas drift asleep on the couch. The storm outside was gentler now, almost like a lullaby. He wanted to turn away, but instead he whispered, barely audible, "Good night, Lucas." Lucas stirred slightly but didn't wake. Ethan turned off the light and went to his room, closing the door softly behind him. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the dark, heart heavy and full all at once. It wasn't love. It wasn't even desire. It was connection, unexpected, fleeting, but real. And as the night deepened, Ethan realized he had crossed no visible line, yet something inside him had shifted forever. He lay back, listening to the rain, unsure if what he felt was guilt or gratitude. Maybe both. The morning came too soon. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed in pale light. Ethan woke early, the air still carrying that faint scent of coffee and rain. From the living room, he heard the soft shuffle of movement, Lucas packing his bag. The sound felt final. Ethan stood quietly in the doorway as Lucas zipped his suitcase. Their eyes met, and both of them smiled the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. "You're up early," Lucas said softly. "I didn't sleep much," Ethan admitted. Lucas nodded, adjusting his tie. "Me neither." For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet between them was calm, almost peaceful. Then Lucas sighed, a sound that carried both gratitude and regret. "Thank you," he said. "For the place, the coffee, and the company." Ethan wanted to say something meaningful, something that would capture the strange, beautiful ache of the last 2 days. But all he could manage was, "Safe flight, Captain." Lucas chuckled lightly. "Let's hope I make this one." They shared one last smile, soft and real. Then Lucas picked up his bag and headed for the door. Just before stepping out, he turned back. "You know," he said, "some flights are missed for a reason." Ethan held his gaze for a long second. Maybe so. And then Lucas was gone. The door closed with a quiet click, leaving the apartment feeling bigger and emptier all at once. Ethan stood there for a while, staring at the empty space where Lucas had been. The silence felt heavy but not sad, just thoughtful. Something had changed inside him, though he couldn't name it yet. He spent the rest of the morning cleaning up, washing the dishes, folding the blanket Lucas had used, setting the room back the way it was before. But nothing looked quite the same anymore. There was still the faintest trace of his cologne in the air, like the echo of a moment that had already slipped away. Later that afternoon, Ethan went for a walk. The city was bright again, sunlight glinting off wet pavement. He passed the cafe they'd visited the day before and smiled faintly. For a brief moment, he could almost hear Lucas's laugh again, could almost feel that quiet connection, not as a wound, but as something that reminded him he was still capable of feeling deeply. When he returned home, his phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Can't wait to see you next week." "Miss you." Ethan stared at the words. They should have brought comfort, but instead they stirred a quiet unease. After a long pause, he replied simply, "Miss you too." That night, Ethan lay in bed thinking about everything, about love, distance, and the quiet spaces where people drift apart without realizing. He thought about how easy it was to get lost in the motion of everyday life, and how hard it was to stop and see what your heart truly needed. He hadn't done anything wrong in those 2 days, but something about the experience with Lucas had cracked open a truth he'd been ignoring. He loved Daniel, but he also realized he'd stopped showing up emotionally, stopped being present, stopped reaching across the silence that had grown between them. When Daniel finally returned home a week later, Ethan met him at the airport. The hug felt familiar but distant, like a memory rehearsed too often. Over dinner that night, Ethan decided to be honest. Not about Lucas, but about himself. He told Daniel how lonely he'd felt, how the distance had turned their love into routine. Daniel didn't speak for a long time. Then quietly he said, "Maybe we both stopped trying. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't an ending either. It was simply the truth, raw, human, and necessary." They both promised to start again, to listen more, to be present. Whether it would work or not, Ethan didn't know. But for the first time in a long while, he felt seen, not by someone else, but by himself. Months later, Ethan was back at work, rolling his luggage down the jet bridge of another early morning flight. The hum of engines and chatter of passengers filled the air. He stepped onto the plane, greeted the crew, and began checking the cabin. When he reached the cockpit, his breath caught for a moment. Sitting in the pilot's seat was Lucas. Their eyes met instantly. No words, just a flicker of surprise, then recognition. Lucas smiled, that same small, knowing smile, and nodded once. Ethan returned it. Nothing more needed to be said. The world had already moved on, but that brief connection remained quietly alive between them. As the plane lifted through the clouds, Ethan looked out the window. The sky was endless, soft blue fading into white. For the first time in months, he didn't feel lost up here. He felt grounded, not by love or guilt, but by the simple truth that every missed flight, every delay, every pause in life has its purpose. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and whispered to himself, "Sometimes the flights we miss are the ones that show us where we truly belong." Outside, the sunlight broke through the clouds, turning the wings of the plane gold. Ethan smiled, ready to move forward, not chasing what could have been, but finally at peace with what was.